Welcome back, everybody. No grand jury. That's the news coming out today in the ongoing Trayvon Martin case. Special prosecutor investigating Martin's death decided against using a grand jury to determine whether or not any charges ought to be brought in connection with Martin's death. Corey's office didn't give a reason for the decision. And a statement released by Angela Corey's office said, quote, "From the moment that she was assigned, Corey noted she may not need a grand jury at this time. The investigation continues and there will be no further comment from this office." And the state attorney, already investigating the shooting, had said that the case would go to a grand jury tomorrow, but the state attorney removed himself from the case late March, as you may remember, and was replaced by the aforementioned Corey. Now, Corey, for his part, said the decision to not go to a grand jury shouldn't be interpreted as whether or not charges will be filed or won't be against Zimmerman. And the announcement does mean that the decision now rests solely in Corey's hands. Now, under Florida law, only first-degree murder cases require the use of grand juries. Now, reactions to the news have been mixed here. Suffice to say, on both sides, guys, they relate this as success. Crump, the attorney for the Martin family, says this is good news. And on the flip side, Zimmerman's counsel says, again here, we're a courageous move by the prosecutor. But Andrew, we're hearing already, as early as this week, we could see an arrest of Mr. Zimmerman.
Yeah, there was a report out of a station in Orlando, and they're obviously closest to it, and they've been working the case from all angles, that an arrest of Zimmerman could be imminent this week. Charges could be filed as early as this week. But again, nothing official that's coming through. The only official word that we heard today, no grand jury.
Okay, and I think for some folks at home, just to get clarity, grand jury not a prerequisite is unless we said first-degree murder. All right. If this thing plays out and that there is an arrest, and WFTV out of Orlando is reporting that it'll be taking place this week, is there an expectation of, is some justice going to be enough here? Or is there a certain charge, let alone a conviction, that the community is looking for here to say, all right, message delivered, justice delivered as well?
Well, I think what's important is that to notice that the murder one seems to be off the table. And I think from the community standpoint, that's what you want to hear him being charged with. If he's charged with lesser, I'm not an attorney, I'll be the first to say that. But if there is a manslaughter charge or something, I think for a lot of folks, it would seem as though it's not what he should be getting, that he's somehow getting off. And then, unfortunately, this is probably just some legalese that needs to be explained, but it's hard to explain away because the emotions are so very high. But I think that taking the murder one off the table is raising some eyebrows, but it remains to be seen whether or not he gets hit on multiple other charges or things that amount to the seriousness of a murder.
And from what little I've gotten from the legal community, this is going to be tough to charge at that level, and the danger of overcharging because of the Florida laws in the books from Stand Your Ground, how the case itself was handled, how it might have been botched, at least it certainly appears, by the Sanford PD originally. To reconstruct the events post-fact is always much more difficult than if the evidence were obtained, the detention was properly done, the investigation. They can't go back and see if he had drugs or alcohol in the system. I'm talking about Zimmerman. So many of these questions that a lot of us, we look at a videotape, say that can't be declarative as fact.
That's why when I heard about the grand jury today, my first reaction was another missing the mark here, another not reaching for the most accurate or the most intense. Whether it's the police department, whether it's the prosecutors. I mean, I almost had a feeling of no confidence that any sense of justice was going to come out of this. A Keystone Cops mentality to Sanford and the Florida investigator and just all the way around, which made me wonder, is it time for the Justice Department? Is it time for the feds to get into this?
See, my reaction is just the opposite. Having covered, for example, Bensonhurst and Howard Beach, in which Charles Hines, who's now the district attorney of Brooklyn, Kings County, handled one of these cases, the charging is extremely important, as we all know. You mentioned the word overcharging. If you overreach, we can sit here. We can sit here all day and talk about the case. We don't have to prove it.
Right.
That prosecutor is under the burden, as you mentioned.
And if he
no
just
drug.
walks
That's
completely,
right. That's right. And so, not to charge Zimmerman with murder one is a good thing. It really is a good thing. Now, if you're a community activist, it may give you a reason scream and yell for a little bit. But even the Al Sharptons know how important the charging is. Sometimes going for a manslaughter is better than a murder because it's much easier to prove in the court of law.
But is that justice?
I think any reasonable person will conclude if Zimmerman goes to jail, that's justice, considering that he was not going to face anything at all.
I think probation, anything like that, I think we're going to have a much different conversation. All right, I wanted to bring this up because some of you may have heard of this. I'm going to give it the abbreviated version. John Derbyshire. He is, or I should say was, a writer for the New Republican who was recently let go specifically for the following. And I'm going to give you an abbreviated version. This was a diatribe he wrote, but it was not published in the New Republic, but yet came out here. And there's the beginnings of it. But I want to jump ahead to, and again, I'm reading in part here, guys, because it's like 8 pages, but he says, a small cohort of blacks. This is him talking about the reverse talk that black parents have with their children. This is the talk that a white parent and his ideas should have with their children. He says, a small cohort of blacks, in my experience, around 5%, is ferociously hostile to whites and will go to great lengths to inconvenience or harm us. A much larger cohort of blacks, around half, will go along passively if the 5% takes leadership in some event. They will do this out of racial solidarity, the national willingness of most human beings to be led, and a vague feeling that whites have it coming. Thus, while always attentive to the particular qualities of individuals, on the many occasions where you have nothing to guide you but knowledge of those mean differences, use statistical common sense. And here's his suggestions. Avoid concentration of blacks not all known to you personally. Stay out of heavily black neighborhoods. If planning a trip to a beach or amusement park at some date, find out whether it's likely to be swamped with blacks on that date. I'm going to jump ahead. Do not attend events likely to draw a lot of blacks. If you're at a public event at which the number of blacks suddenly swells, leave as quickly as possible. Do not settle in a district or municipality run by a black politician. Before voting for a black politician, scrutinize his or her character much more carefully than you would a white. Do not act the Good Samaritan to blacks in apparent distress. For example, on the highway, if accosted by a strange black in the street, smile and say something polite but keep moving. The mean intelligence of blacks is much lower than that for whites. And again, I'm sorry, this is for the National Review if I said otherwise here. Now, disgusting, the guy fired. There was a response here. In fact, from the editor saying, you know, he went from bizarre to outright nasty and indefensible. But in some ways, I said there was a scab that was pulled off with the Trayvon Martin case, and we heard a lot of, is there a growing schism in this country with whites and blacks? Or is this guy just a lunatic? There was a scene that played out in Baltimore on St. Patrick's Day. The video's making its way around. We don't have time for it tonight, the Trayvon Martin case. But are all the preconceptions we think that we thought was maybe from, if not a different age, but getting better, in fact, still very much there, and it's playing out uglier and uglier?
I mean, we're living in a post-racial society, right? Like whoever really actually believed that. It seems like it's open season on black people right now. I mean, the shootings in Tulsa, I'm not shocked by what's happening. I mean, these are statements that people have made. These are actions that people have been taking for hundreds of years. We'd like to think that things are different, but they are not. The election of a black president has not changed race relations in this country. In fact, what I think is that we're going to see it bubble to the surface a whole lot more. When I talked about seniors earlier, one of the big concerns that seniors have is the increasing diversity in this country. That's been polled. And what they're saying is that they're concerned about the diversity in this country and that they feel that things are changing too rapidly. There is a growing concern and fear, it seems, of people of color. And folks kind of need to just get over it.
There's another concern that I have, which is the political division when it comes to the divisions in race. And it seems more and more like there is a political division. This man was writing in the National Review, which is as conservative and a home for conservative thought, and The reaction from Rich Lowry when he was fired was, well, he's been funny before, even if he skirts the line. This was too far, so we had to let him go. But I asked last week or the week before, why the political division in the Trayvon Martin case? Why all the defenders of Zimmerman are showing up on Fox News and all the defenders of Trayvon Martin are showing up on MSNBC? Go back to the 2008 election. There was a racial division along party and ideological lines.
But I think we got to be careful in that, to be fair, the National Review fired this guy immediately and said what he said was disgusting. I didn't hear, and I saw the idiotic comments by Geraldo, but I didn't see folks on Fox saying, hey, let's stick up for poor Zimmerman here.
But every time a defender of Zimmerman has come forward, it's been on Fox News.
That is true. What do you think?
Honestly, I don't pay much attention to idiots like that. I really don't. I try and live my life. I try and make sure my kids are raised the right way. I try and be a good person to others. I try and make sure I'm educated, my kids are educated. I don't pay attention. I can't believe that he even had a platform, frankly.
But that I think that speaks to my concern, that he had a platform that got him almost all the way to where he went over the edge. Well, what's that platform that lifts him right up to that edge and then he jumps off on his own?
Well, and you know what? My only point is, 4 years ago, remember where people would, you know, some of us would grimace here when we heard comments attacking Obama, and they call him Hussein, and they call him Osama, a slip of the tongue, and then people say, is he really an American, and all those code stuff, and we said, oh, well, there was just a couple, you know, whack jobs in a small bizarro crowd. It feeds into stuff like this, and people that should know where lines are that don't cross, they get confused here. This wasn't even remotely there. And again, if I said a different publication, I'm sorry. That again was in the National Review that John Derbyshire wrote or attempted to write that and was since been removed from.